It's the Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White, and it's episode 267 on Friday the 13th. I don't believe in superstitions, but, it's still Friday the 13th, and so if that bothers you, I'm not sure what you should do about it. But it is the week of 8 January 2023. We've got Frozen, Fortinet, Scattered Spider, Cisco, Juniper, Apache, Apache No More so we want to be sure and point that out. Telegram, Control Web Panel, and other stories on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
How is your business staying one step ahead of cyber criminals? Secure your email applications, network, and data with Barracuda. Protect your business and go from zero to security in no time flat. Whether your team is working in one location or many, Barracuda has solutions that are easy to buy, deploy, and use. Learn how Barracuda can protect your business against ransomware, phishing, and other cyber attacks. Visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Barracuda, your journey secured. All right. Well, Fortinet re-warned everyone to be sure and patch the SSL VPN vulnerability from last month because there are now attacks actively using this, and in particular, they're using it against government organizations and government-related organizations as targets. This is a heap overflow flaw that they did report previously. It's in FortiOS SSL VPN daemon. And it allows attackers to crash the devices. That's like one of the things that can occur remotely, but it can also lead to remote code execution. So both not things you really want happening to your firewalls and routers on a daily basis. The bug was from last year, and it was patched. Apparently, the article said very quietly in November, like they didn't actually announce it or anything like that. They just sort of patched this 0 day and didn't say anything about it. And then the customers got privately notified on the 7th of December. But then Fortinet also released a public statement on the 12th of December that the bug was being actively exploited. So on Wednesday of this week, so now we're all the way up into the middle of January, on Wednesday of this week, a follow-up report from Fortinet said that attackers were using the exploit to compromise SSL VPN appliances to deploy a Trojanized version of the IPS engine. So the IPS engine is the engine that runs Fortinet SSL VPN. And so I guess they're replacing your basic engine with some Trojanized thing. Fortinet said these attacks were highly targeted and highly specialized, and they were focused on government-related targets. They said that the threat actor in the December attack showed advanced capabilities, including the ability to reverse engineer parts of the Fortinet OS. So they took the engine and reverse engineered it and put a Trojan in it. The advice from Fortinet is you should immediately, and they even said immediately, it's not just me saying that, even though we all do, immediately upgrade to a patched version of FortiOS and reach out to Fortinet support to see if they can assess your system for any indicators of compromise. So if you are running old versions, you may already be compromised. You may already have a Trojanized core. Yeah, that would be bad. A group called Scattered Spider, another pretty cool, I kind of like that name a lot. Scattered Spider was observed trying to deploy Intel Ethernet diagnostic drivers in a bring your own vulnerable driver attack. And so if you haven't heard that term, that BYOVD attack before, basically what it means is that it's really hard for anti-malware products to detect drivers that are typical drivers in systems, especially if they may be signed drivers. And so if they can substitute a driver with a different driver that does the same thing but maybe has some kind of vulnerability built into it, then you've got a big problem, and your operating system is probably not going to detect that Intel Ethernet driver. So basically, in this case, they have a kernel mode driver, which is known to be vulnerable. And they figure out any kernel mode drivers that may actually be vulnerable, because if they can inject those or utilize those, then they have a lot of high-powered access, right? Because a kernel-level device driver often has run with admin or root or whatever you want to call it privilege, So they have the highest level of executability on the system. So if somebody can use that to execute code, that code is going to run as admin, and that's really, really dangerous. CrowdStrike reported the tactic and started reporting on Scattered Spider last month. Their latest exploit is involving this Intel Ethernet driver, which is a 64-bit kernel driver that has 35 different functions that is signed. But it's signed with stolen certs from NVIDIA and Global Software LLC, which means Windows looks at it and says, hey, good to go. And that's not really a Windows flaw. It's just the nature of this thing. It's like, all the ID says you're good, and the guard at the gate looks at your ID, looks at you, here's your voice, imprint or whatever. My voice is my passport, and all of a sudden they don't have anything else to go by. Once they have access, they can disable using this driver, they can disable other threat products you're running. They may cause those threat products to allow them to develop this further. And the belief is that they're going to add more tools using this exploit just to get further into the system. The attack starts by decrypting a list of targeted security products to see if you have any of them, and then it patches the drivers. So that's what this basic exploit does. And so that means everything looks normal to the system. Blackbyte and Lazarus have both used similar attacks in the past, and Microsoft tried to block these attacks using a block list in 2021, but these drivers are not blocked because, except on Win 11 2022. So they did not do this because Microsoft doesn't update that block list except on major version releases. So if you're running Windows 10 or something, and they're not going to release another major release of Windows 10, I don't think. And so they may not ever update that block list to contain these. There's a bunch of reference articles and suggestions in this article if you're interested or concerned about such things. Last month, Microsoft revealed that a threat actor was using Telegram to target cryptocurrency VIPs and infect them. And now another firm has found additional information that the attackers are trying to impersonate legitimate entities in the cryptocurrency space on Telegram. So they're actively doing this. The original report said that a Telegram group chat was used to attack crypto investment companies, and a cryptocurrency firm hired Safeguard Cyber to help investigate a group called Dev0139. Safeguard Division 7, which is their threat analytics team, basically located and confirmed an instance on that company's site where the employees were being targeted as far back as July 2022. The new information that they released reflected that it was the same type of attack, the same tactics, everything looked the same that Microsoft had observed previously with Dev0139. Now the attackers were using Telegram groups to facilitate communications between VIP clients and crypto platforms and trying to build their trust. So they basically, what they do is they start off by contacting you saying, hey, do you want a huge opportunity? I know you're a player. And, playing on people's egos and stuff, and they get them to invest small amounts of money, and then actually, I don't know if they're providing returns, but a lot of times they get them to put, $100, $500 or euros or whatever into these things. And then, when they don't lose that money right away, they come back and say, hey, would you like to put more money in, and so forth. And then they hit you with a bunch of Excel files that have malware that's disguised as surveys that they're asking you about this. And then it went on and said Dev0139 has detailed knowledge of the crypto space and detailed knowledge of participants. So they're working that space pretty heavy. So be careful if you're involved in that, especially on Telegram. According to this story, another Telegram issue, the use of Telegram bots for credential exfiltration has increased more than 8 times between 2021 and 2022. So like an 800% increase in the number of Telegram bots that are doing this. The research was done by Cofins, and they found that while using bots to do whatever is nothing new, it was not previously a common approach on Telegram to do credential phishing. So these Telegram bots, if you've not worked with them, they're pretty basic bots. So there's basically a framework, and you put the bot together, give it tasks to do, and then it gets an API and so forth so that you can access it remotely. So the bot can do any kind of basic task or service, which would include delivering answers to the bad guy. They can also, of course, have the bot post things and so forth. The bots can convert file types into other file types or set reminders, all this kind of usual bot stuff. But the bot only has to get a text from the victim and then hand it off to the attacker to be effective. So they're basically using the bot to query, getting you to type information into it, and then the bot actually forwards that on. I mean, it's basically HTML, but a lot of malware detection has trouble detecting, data in the actual layer 7 kind of stuff. So what happens is the bot can collect this, pass it along, and because it's not really doing any action that is, negative or malicious, it often gets around all these services. Effectively, what they were doing is a malicious email is sent to the victim from the bot, and if they reply with their information, and the one they were showing as an example in the article, it was like a login thing, and then if you put your login information there, it passes that into the bot's API, and then it delivers all those goods to the attacker. So be careful out there, and don't give up your credentials. I mean, that's just sort of like, lesson 1. Juniper published 32 security advisories this week to cover more than 230 vulnerabilities. 200 of those affect third-party components. So a biggie. 3 of the advisories are rated critical, and about 20 have high ratings. 24 of the vulnerabilities have already been patched. So basically, they were alerting you to a whole piles of vulnerabilities in different components, and they patched 24 of them. Most of the things in this release were denial of service attack, which could be triggered by unauthenticated attackers with network access. So, this was the kind of stuff that gets really, really annoying if you're trying to run an enterprise and all your devices keep crashing. Believe me, been there with other. It wasn't Juniper, but I've been there with other stuff. They said that there's no indication currently that any of these had been exploited in the wild, but CISA had advised organizations to review these advisories if you're using Juniper or any of Juniper's third-party components and make appropriate patches. So, if you're using any of that stuff, you might want to check out this article and check out CISA's advisory. Speaking of networking equipment, Cisco announced that no patches will be released for critical severity vulnerabilities found which affect their small business routers, and they've had problems with these things for years. RV016, RV042, RV042G, and RV082 series are all end-of-life. So these are old, like small business routers that they've been selling for a long time, but a lot of people have them. And so if you do have one, they are end-of-life. They are not going to patch any of this stuff. The defect that was found is and this just keeps coming up. It's in the web-based management interface of the routers. And this, of course, can result in an authentication bypass for the device, and then the people are in your router, and of course, once they're in your router, they can actually add, they can make their own VPN connection into your network if you have a license for that. Look, put these web interfaces, if you have web interfaces on networking devices, you need to put them in a management-only VLAN or disable them altogether. If you've got them exposed to the internet, someone is going to exploit them. And I could report a story all the time about, and it's not just Cisco, about all these management interfaces that people have put up, and they apparently have very low levels of security because the assumption was that management port on your device was going to be used for this, and that management port on your device was going to be plugged into a management VLAN that maybe only 1 or 2 people have access to, or at the very least your IT group or your security group has access to, not that everybody in the company could see it, and not that everybody on the internet could see it. At worst, if you have to have this stuff, you need to block that access very, very carefully. Limit it to a single IP address that one person needs to get in. Make sure they're using a VPN. Do not let the real world actually see these things, or you will be sorry. But in the meantime, you may want to upgrade if you're running one of these devices. But block the thing off if you are still using it and can't afford to upgrade. None of this stuff was designed to be wide open running on the internet. I mean, it's just the way it is. I don't usually do politics, and I try to stay away from it because that's not our purpose here. But a long time ago, one of my neighbors in Colorado was a Native American and was at the university studying, and I was at the university studying, and we got to know this person very well, and we had dinner with them all the time and so forth. And one of the things he brought up to me that was interesting, and I'll bring it up to you, and I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying this is a story. He was trying to get a lot of local schools in Colorado to change the names of their schools and mascots that were using Native American culture as a basis. And I, being a white guy, had never really thought about this before. I mean, I really hadn't. I know it was an issue, but I had never really thought about it. But I really support it. I mean, I know some people get upset about that, and they say, "Oh, this is my team, this is my school, this is my mascot," and so on. But at the end of the day, my policies always ask the people that it affects, that it impacts, and so when I hear issues about various things, because I am a white guy and I don't really have that kind of insight, it shouldn't be about whether I'm offended by it or not. But anyway, Natives in Tech, which you can check out if you're interested, is a nonprofit that's based in the United States, and they actually put out a call to Apache, the Apache Software Foundation, to change its name and abide by its own code of conduct. And I honestly had no idea that Apache would. I mean, I just never made the connection. It's like Apache. I never really thought about that was some kind of Native American thing, which I know that's white privilege, right? I mean, that's the absolute epitome of white privilege. But I just never thought about it. And then I when somebody mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, that was like a tribe, right? They were on like old westerns, or something like that. I always thought it was an acronym for a long time. I never really thought about it at all, but that is called white privilege, by the way. But the code of conduct on ASF says that you should, quote, be careful in the words that you choose and be kind to others. Do not insult or put down other participants and so forth. And it also says, don't use racist language, etc. And okay, so maybe they just change the name to ASF and be done with all this outdated, reference type stuff. I mean, I like I say, when I hear this, I go, well, that doesn't affect me, but it does affect other people. And there are people, I'm sure, that actually have that kind of, that are affiliated with Native groups, and I know lots of them. And I asked a person I know about this, and they said, yeah, they should get rid of that. So that's the determinant for me. A vulnerability in Control Web Panel is being actively exploited for an unauthenticated remote code execution attack. Shadow Server Group posted on Twitter that the exploitation is trivial and said a proof of concept has been published. Newman Turley of Gay Cyber Security found that the vulnerability originally, and it was patched back in October. But Gray Noise showed that attacks on this vulnerability had re-begun on January 7th, and they've been slowly increasing. Shadow Server indicated there was 38,000 IP addresses running Control Web Panel, which is a CentOS web interface that you can use. The severity of this vulnerability is rated 9.8 out of 10. So, if you're running CentOS and you're running Control Web Panel and you have it exposed to anyone other than your private management network, the recommendation is upgrade it to at least version 0.9.8.1147 immediately, because this is apparently a pretty, dire thing if you've exposed that Control Web Panel to the world, and apparently 38,000 of you have. So you may want to scan your own systems and make sure somebody, and these are those things that people put up and they don't tell anybody, and it's sitting there on, in public, and so that, some engineer could get in from home to manage that website, and it's just sitting out there wide open. So, be careful. Well, for this week's thread of the week, I'm going to talk about your family. Actually, I'm going to talk about my family, but I mean, think about it. Supply chain attacks, right? I mean, I saw this article about a scam, and I immediately started thinking about supply chain attacks, because that is the new way to get to things, right? As we start securing our local stuff, the supply chain attack is the way that people are now trying to get in. And, you and I are always sitting here talking about security, and we're always sitting here thinking paranoid thoughts that maybe that propane heater might be looking at me funny, and maybe it's been compromised somehow, even though it doesn't appear to have any tech in it other than an on switch. But wait, wasn't there some kind of switch attack? Didn't Ben Gurion come up with some kind of elaborate on switch attack, even if it didn't have any tech at all? It was just literally a rocker switch? Probably. But, no. I mean, I'm going to sit here all night with this propane heater with a meat axe just in case it, it decides to do something. But let's talk about the supply chain in the context of your family. So I was reading this story about Eurocops, whatever they are. I never heard that term before, but it said Eurocops. Maybe that means, I don't know, Europol, I think is what that's called now. But anyway, they said they arrested some scammers. Okay, big woo. Then, in fact, they said they arrested 15 people and shut down a multi-county network of call centers selling fake crypto and they'd stolen hundreds of millions of euros. So, I mean, to me, that's like a story you see, over and over and over again since the dawn of time. I mean, they basically did what scammers have been doing since that first caveman sold a piece of prime real estate in Florida over on that new continent to the second caveman that they didn't actually own. I mean, exploiting people's basic tendency toward trust and basic tendency toward greed is just been done, and it works, and that's why they keep doing it. The phony investments lured people to a site, of course, that promised amazing investment opportunities with a very low initial buy-in. Then they urge people to invest more and more and more, of course, right? I mean, we even have names for that. We have Ponzi schemes and multi-level marketing. Oops, I'm not supposed to say that. But, I mean, all that stuff's nothing new. I mean, this stuff has literally been going on forever, as long as there were humans. But it made me start to think. I was like, you and I are paranoid plus. I mean, at least I am. But our families and our employees' families are probably not. I mean, I'll use my dad as an example. He was a smart guy, right? I mean, he was a self-made man type who worked his way up from cleaning up when the programmers left, emptying the ashtrays and stuff, to being an assistant to a wire plugger, because that's how you wrote code in those days, to taking over the whole payroll division of a major multinational. I am the very model of a modern major general. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, he had some kind of tech block. I mean, I always thought my dad was like super smart, right? I mean, I could never figure out how he had this tech block. And I don't mean like he couldn't figure out machine language. I mean, like it was just this weird psychological problem. And I'm not exaggerating. It was so strange. I mean, my dad figured out a way to make custom tools to work on my MG to keep it running. And he built them. And he fixed the damn thing. It was amazing. In fact, the guy at the MG place was like, "How did you do that?" And I was like, "My dad made this weird tool that like goes around corners." And the guy was like, "Weird. Could I see one?" But I mean, my dad was still running a mayoral campaign, a business, and I'm not for him to be mayor, but he was running somebody else's, and a business, and who knows what all else he was on the day that he died at 89 years old. And he used the computer a lot. He wasn't one of those, people who's like, "I don't use computers." I mean, but he was terrified of the thing. And when he died, I did a whole forensic workup on his computer because I wanted to be sure there was nothing there we needed to know about. And, there was all these people calling and saying, he does this for us and he managed our bank accounts and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, maybe I should recover some of these things. But I noticed that he had all these emails and texts from his friends, and it was like an attack dream. I mean, a bunch of people who constantly share files that say things like funny story or I bet you didn't know this or some patriotic thing. My dad was really patriotic and like particularly about respecting the flag. And, like we always had to take the flag down every night and put the flag up every morning. And, he had the whole booklet on how you handle the flag. And like, you're not allowed to make shorts out of it or anything like that. Although he did have a shirt that had a flag on it. And I was like, and don't bring up that. I was like, "Dad, I think your shirt's in violation of the flag code." And he got really mad. But, I mean, you know what I mean. And I couldn't believe how many times somebody on his systems was saying something like in his email, "I've been hacked. Don't open anything for me." I'm like, oh, my God. So this made me start thinking about something we didn't really talk about when I was doing audit, which was the human side of the supply chain. I mean, think about that. How many people do you have working from home today, like right now? At least some, probably. I mean, maybe you are. And so those home users are accessing the VPN and connected to the network from what? Their machine? Now, I know some of you are going, "Oh, right, yeah, at our place, they use a specific laptop that I've approved, and it's locked down and deep frozen, and nobody can add anything," or whatever. And that's good, right? I mean, it's annoying, but it's good. But what happens when somebody uses their kid's laptop, or worse, they use my dad's desktop to get into the VPN? I mean, it really took me a while to get my dad around to not following orders that came in on the computer. I mean, if a pop-up box came up on his computer that said, "Your computer is infected, click here to correct." I mean, that was like Depression-era dynamite, right? It was like, oh, an instruction. I need to follow it. And I had to say, "Don't click that stuff, Dad. If you're not sure and you don't know who it's from." But even then, he knew who it was from. He's like, "Oh, that came from my friend Saul." And I'm like, "Are you sure that's Saul, Dad? You got to be really careful about opening these files. Why is Saul sending you pictures of, whatever?" And I mean, my dad understood old money scams. He understood paycheck ripoffs. He understood all this stuff and explained it to people all the time. But, as he got older, I just had to set up remote access because he would call me all the time and say, I need you to look at the screen and tell me what this is. And sometimes it was just something like Windows Update. And I'm like, okay, Dad, it's Windows Update. Just make sure it's but then I'm like immediately going, And my dad wasn't demented and he wasn't stupid. He just had some kind of tech block about it. And I don't think it was because he was old, because he had it for a long, long time. I think it might have been because all the computers he had ever used were government controlled and they were, internal mainframes. And I think he sort of trusted them. And, but it made me start thinking, are these scammers going to say, wow, we can make a little bit of money, or we could actually turn our sights on access to these corporate networks? And we know they already do, right? I'm not naive. But they may do it with things like this money scam, because if they could compromise my dad's machine, and my dad's is connected to the mayor's office machine, and it's also connected to my machine and a machine at the police department, and my machine is connected to the leg bone, and the leg bone is connected to the hip bone, and so on, all of a sudden you've got serious problems that are supply chain, right? So it may be time that you start thinking about, how do you start to train not only your employees, but you may have to actually train them to train their families, as well as to keep Junior, who has some really serious questions about human anatomy and is searching for them on the internet, or my dad, who sits down to check his AOL email account and clicks something called ALO, which is a scam site, and opens a file that says flag disrespected and gets infected with Quackbot. If he saw the cursor moving on the screen, he would have sat down and said, I wonder if Doug is busy today. I'll wait till tomorrow. He may not be busy on Saturday. I'll call him then. And, that was just the kind of questions he would ask about that. And, it was really scary. And as he did get older, he became a lot like a lot of older people. And he was, really not as confident about, saying, I think this guy ringing our front door asking for money is a con man. He was more like, call my brother, who's a police officer, and say, is this guy a con man? And my brother would say, get the ball bat and go to town, kind of stuff. My brother would never say that. He would come over and take care of it. But regardless, all that starts to sound like elaborate supply chain stuff that relies on tried and true methods of phishing. So, if you're in that BYOD world and you have employees working remotely, it may be time to start pushing some paranoia out, because subtle attacks may well work. If they've got stuff on there, you may not see it either. And they've been working for thousands and thousands of years. Those same tactics that have been ripping people off in ancient Mesopotamia can be used today to plant malware, Trojans, and so forth. So it may be time that we all start thinking about this some more, because all the threats aren't necessarily just coming from apps. They may actually be coming from, people targeting people. And remember, all that information is interrelated, right? I can go find it. I can find out who your family is. I can find out who your parents are. I can find out who your great aunt is that maybe is not so good at using the computer. And if I can start working through that chain, I've got another supply chain target. So I don't know. That's my paranoid thought for the day. Yay. And finally, DARPA invented the internet. They did, but not Al Gore. Sorry, Al, you didn't invent it. I know you said that. Probably wish you hadn't, but you did. But DARPA invented the internet, but they're also the place that's filled with money, weird science, and scary stuff that you aren't sure why they're doing that, but who knows, maybe it will be cool. If you want somebody to invent, could we invent something that would destroy the sun? Just as a thought experiment, like DARPA, and I'm all for it. I love weird science, but they are now funding research into drugs that would protect people from extreme cold. It seems like extreme heat would be better for me. Cold, I usually can deal with. I've got gear for that. I used to ski every day at minus 40 and minus 100 wind chill in Colorado. But heat really gets to me. But the development is in the Young Faculty Award programs, which provides dollars to researchers to innovate. And one of the recipients said they will investigate non-genetic treatment, which will enhance our adaptation to cold temperatures via thermogenesis, which is like the internal heat production of your body. So that also causes you to shiver, right? Because they always told me in dive class that if you were shivering, you were okay. If you stopped shivering, that's when it was bad. And I'm all for it, but it sure sounds scary. There'd be some kind of Arctic group or whatever, and I want to kind of know why they're doing it. But I'm not sure I want to be a student volunteer for the study, but even if they do pay you $25, I got dunked in a tank of really, really cold water once, and to measure how fat I was. but it got me $100 back in the day. And anyway, that's the news. We're off next week, so I will see you on a week from Tuesday. But it's going to be at our new time, which is 12 noon every time. Eastern time, which is 1700 UTC around the world. So you can figure it out from there. See you then.